Hey everyone, Florida Man here. Got a hot take for you. Won't be much of an update, just some rambling thoughts about what's been happening in Ukraine and what happened recently with the Nato summit. And I feel like these ideas pop up in my head and I need to kind of like chew on them a bit. And then there's these previous experiences, and I kind of just always want to equate these experiences. Like I always got to find like an analogy for what's happening in the world about previous experience, or I just kind of see them connect. And when I see them connect, it's kind of like, oh wow, it's interesting and frustrating at the same time, because I feel like basically we got a bunch of noobs running our strategic, planning on, in the Western countries. I feel like NATO is run by a bunch of noobs. And why do I say that? I don't mean real armchair general here. I gotta give a lot of context. And it's about a specific approach or specific idea. It's been really frustrating me. I think it frustrates a lot of people here in Ukraine. So first up, I got to talk about a video game, a type of video game. So if you don't want to hear me talk about strategy games for a bit, go ahead, click off. But this is going to be very important for people who, love their strategy games, but also love geopolitics. And it's about turtling. For like the beginning, I was going to say camping. I think we all know the term camping and turtling. Those are kind of the same thing, but very different. They're used in different game genres and they kind of work differently. So bring it back to my real life experience during COVID times when everyone, had nothing to do. So everyone played a lot of video games. Me and my best friend, because we both had free time finally, we could play a bunch of games together, and we were both huge strategy fans, and we played like a lot of Total War together. We had great time doing Shogun runs and all that sort of stuff. But there was, it was like 2 years, so, we were playing different games. But one time I got into a new type of game. I never really played them type before. It's a RTS type, but not in the sense of like StarCraft or that other stuff. It's more of like a milsim, but not a real milsim. So Eugen Systems, they have a game series called Steel Division. And this is specifically going to Steel Division 44, I think it is, the Normandy one. And I try to get my best bud on it. And, at first he was not on it. And it's a game with a really high learning curve, especially if you're playing as the Allies. So if you're familiar with RTS, games, I'm pretty sure most of my audience understands video games. RTS is, real-time strategy games. And a lot of the times, it's about not only the fighting part, maneuvering, but a lot of it has to do with resource management. And I feel like it's just too much micro. The winner is the one with the best micro. So, I love the thinking part of the games, but I hate the need to make 300 clicks a minute to be a competitive person against someone else. That's why I like Eugen's game, Steel Divisions. It's a far slower paced game. A match can last like an hour or so. And the resources, basically, it's on a clock. Everyone has the same resources unless, there's things change in the future. But pretty much you're on a set resource limit. Every minute you get a set number of resources. And with that, you can bring in new troops and set up new positions. And, of course, since it's Normandy, it's, the Axis Germans versus the Allies. So you got the British, you got the Americans, you got the Canadians, and then they had like a French resistance unit. But yeah, so me and my friend, we're pretty skilled strategy players, and we come in on the Allied side because, we don't want to be fucking fascists. So we always played the Allies. We never played the Axis. We never played as the Germans. We always played as the Allies. But you get your ass fucking kicked. It is no joke that basically the win to lose ratio between Allies and the Germans is ridiculous. I would say there were so many times we enter a match where it's like a 4v4, and sometimes they'll have like a big match of 10v10, and those are spectacular. Those are like, proper continental wars happening. And generally like 5 out of 6 matches you're going to lose. You're going to lose, especially if you're playing as the Allies and you're learning how to learn to play. And sorry, I have to talk about this to get to the point about turtling. And one of the issues and the reason why the Allies lose all the time is because the Germans had better kit. All the German stuff was better, especially their tanks. Their tanks were always ungodly good. They had the better artillery. They had the flak cannons. Oh my God, fuck those flak cannons. They had so many cool weapons, and you had your dinky little Shermans. And, your Shermans will get smoked by a tiger. You need a bunch of Shermans or else they're going to get smoked by a tiger. And so for a while, it took us a while to figure out, like, how do we beat these guys? Well, there's got to be a way. These guys, they made this game. There's got to be a way to kind of, work around it. First was we understood the purpose of smoke, utilizing smoke to obscure movement. The Germans always outrange you. All their stuff is always better at further range, so you use smoke to get in close, and that's when you use your superior numbers. And that's a big part of the game, was as the Allies, you have, historically, the Allies pretty much, when you're attacking, the idea is to have supremacy in number, like 3-to-1, or I think a 4-to-1 ratio, they always say. And so in this game, all your units are cheaper. All of your units are cheaper, relatively cheaper to the Germans, but they're a little worse. They're not bad, but they're just not as great, especially the big ticket items. The Germans have the big ticket items, like the King Tiger. They always had the King, like there'll only be that one division you can pick on the German side, and they have that King Tiger. And if you let that guy get that King Tiger out on that field, guess what? You're fucked. You have to spend a lot of resources to try to get that King Tiger out. And then the problem is basically on the German side, your challenge, because this game, it's not just infantry and tanks. You have to take in consideration air power as well. So you have anti-air, you have mortar teams, it's a full spectrum, combined armed sort of situation at the time. And so it's really good to understand how combined arms work. And that was like the benefit of the Allied side, is that you can get an early combined arms force. You can get plenty of your AA out, you can get your mortars out, you can get your infantry out, and you can get some light vehicles, and you can start pushing and moving and pushing the Germans. And the Germans don't have, because all their units are more expensive, and because they don't have the full resources to put all their all their units where they need to go. And so that's how you beat the Germans, is that basically you start the initial phase, because that's actually how it works. There's 3 phases. There's like reconnaissance phase, skirmish phase, and full engagement phase. And generally how it works is the Allies dominate the first phase. They dominate the recon phase because, that's what happened pretty much. You had the paratroopers come in, you had all this, and you had like pretty much they set up shop and they set their divisions and they set to defend while they wait for the main force on the mainland to reinforce. And that's kind of what they kind of try to simulate in this way. But now I get to the turtling part. So the Allies' objective, your objective is to always maintain contact with the Germans. Maintain contact, maintain some level of attrition. Force the Germans to use their resources to resupply their basic troops, take out enough of their infantry, so they got to keep sending in more. They can't spend it's like 300 points for a King Tiger, and let's say it's 50 points for an infantry, and you get 80 points per minute. Your objective as the Allied is to constantly keep an attrition on the infantry and lighter stuff, so they don't get the time to build up enough points to buy a King Tiger tank. Because once they get that King Tiger tank, you're in trouble. So the constant objective is to maintain contact and force them to deploy their weaker units. Don't let them deploy their ace in the hole card. And this is where I get into turtling. And that's what we hate. When I was playing like a 10v10 round, we're playing like a 4v4, and me and my friend, we have other people that are playing with us, and we'd always call them role-playing Band of Brothers. This isn't Band of Brothers, because basically what they would do, they would find a small, French village, be like, oh, I'm going to set my guys up in this village. We're going to have a bunch of cool defense positions. I can have all these resources, and we're going to set up all these fire lines and all this sort of stuff. But they're not maintaining contact. The Germans, are also building up. And the thing is, the Germans are going to do a better job building up. And we always tell them, dude, you got to push. Get out of that village. You need to hit contact with them. This isn't about us holding. It's about us pushing them off this map. Don't think you're going to win through attrition of, having them come to attack you. That's not how this works. We need to keep attacking. And that always kind of was very frustrating, because ended up happening, they'd have their beautiful defense system set up with all their guys and everything. And then the Germans would come in with like a Nebel warfare, and they just level the entire town. And then, they lose half their guys, and then they send in 3 of their Tiger tanks. And it doesn't matter how many Shermans you throw at. If there's 3 of them together and they're covering each other's flanks, you're going to have a real hard time trying to dismantle that powerful unit. And so that was always the thing, is to don't let them build up strong enough. So that's turtling. That's the term, turtling. Now we go back to reality and about the NATO summit. And I feel like they're kind of doing the same thing. We just had an agreement from all the members. Trump went in and he got them all to agree to a 5% GDP defense spending. And to me, I'm just like, it's unnecessary. It's turtling. It's in the sense of why are we, all right, we're building up this resources, we're building up our militaries. And I ask, for what reason? For the U.S., I understand we're going to probably have a conflict with China. We're going to have a war, a naval war with China, most likely. But for like the continent, for most of Europe, most NATO members, their conflict is going to be with Russia, unless they're supplying a ship, understandably, sure, if you want to build ships to do that, sure. But if you're talking about, all right, we need to protect ourselves from Russia, so we need to build up a larger military, it's frustrating because guess what? Like, Russia's already in the game, Russia's playing, and they're fighting Ukraine right now. And we already have plenty of assets in NATO partnered areas. It's like, guys, just bring it here. Move those assets to the front. Move the assets where the conflict is. Stop turtling. And that's what it's so aggravating to be here and to read about all this expense. Like, what's it doing? Look, if you're buying more Patriot systems, what's the point? Just send them here. This is where they're going to be. And that's like an interesting idea too. An interesting strategy idea, if you guys ever think about it. Defense and offense, the issue with defending is that the attackers get to choose where to attack, right? You don't get to choose where to defend. The attacker chooses where to attack. And Russia has chosen where to attack. Their attack is in Ukraine, and therefore we can send our resources to Ukraine to defend it, right? But then, basically, they've committed to this. They cannot attack somewhere else. Russia does not have the manpower to attack somewhere else. They have to attack through Ukraine, pretty much. They have to finish this fight first before they can do any other fight. So it just always mind-boggles me, like, all right, if we're building up and we're just turtling in our own states, what's the point? What is the point? Why don't we move these assets to where the fighting is? Also, another strategy, interesting thing, if you ever want to think about it for a little game advice, if you have limited resources, certain limited resources, and you want to force the enemy into a certain position, attack. And I say this in a way of, like, let's say the Patriot systems or EW. I was like, this is armchair general me right now talking, but the Kursk, think about the Kursk operation. The Ukrainians chose to attack Kursk, and that forced the Russians to move their resources there. And think about it, like, if you're limited on resources, if you're limited on Patriots, on anti-air missiles, on, RAP systems, electronic warfare, what you can do, though, is that you can attack. Because if you're trying to defend an entire line and you have to have something to defend missile attacks, like an air attack from multiple areas, that's a large area to cover. But if you attack, especially if you attack an area where they have to do an immediate response, that's where they're going to send their assets. So then you can counter that by that. Sorry, that's tangent there. If I ever start playing strategy games again, that's what I'm going to do. It seems to work. I think that's like just how the brain works. You put the enemy in a dilemma in a high-risk situations. They have to make immediate responses. That's where they make mistakes, and that's where you can catch good assets. But yeah, it's just upsetting. It's so upsetting because Ukraine has done an amazing job with what they have had, the ingenuity here, and also it's like what 5%, dude? That's all going to be drones. Everything's drones now. What's 5% mean? It means drones. That's all you need. Freaking drones. A lot of drones. That's what's happening now. It's just a bunch of drones. We're changing warfare. I don't know, like the 5% increase. If we're doing a 5% increase, and the idea is to get 20th century warfare doctrine items, light infantry vehicles, of course, are good. But if we're talking about armored vehicle tanks, even like more missile, like artillery, like stationary artillery systems, that's out the window, man. I think drones do such a better job and so much better guards. It's such a different price point. So it's just frustrating to see, like, a lot of people here have died. A lot of people have died, a lot of suffering. Like they've been fighting with that one arm behind their back situation. And it's not because there's just not enough resources, there's not enough resources here, but there's enough resources across the people that support Ukraine. And it's just an inability, the political will to move those resources to where they really need to go. And that's upsetting when people die because of political, maybe political, let's say, fright, indecisiveness or concern. The concern I always hear, the main concern is what happens to Russia if Russia really loses. We know what happens to Ukraine if Ukraine loses. Genocide, 4 new obelisks or 5 new obelisks for the Russian Federation, but no nuclear war. And the concern is always, if Russia loses, well, are they going to rage quit? That's always the concern. Is Russia going to rage quit? And that's the issue. But we shouldn't let that, then that's a strategy. Then Russia understands that's their strategy, is that they can always bluff that, or they can always use the threat that they're going to rage quit. They're just going to rage quit from the world and they're going to nuke it. That's what they're going to do. You can't let that be a valuable option for the Russian Federation as a way to get what it wants, that they can just use nuclear blackmail, and pretty much in a sense. And it's just, the money should be put to better programs, man. It should be for defense, but guess what? This is it. This is the conflict. Are they expecting Martians? Like, I'm always like, what? That was always my thing. It's like, all right, where they're attacking, put your assets there. Like, where else are they going to attack you? Are you afraid of like the seamen coming out? Dagon's going to come out from the sea with his army of fish people. Like, it's just going to be China. That's it. It's Russia and China. I don't think Europe is too concerned about what's going on in China in that sense. I'm not a big expert when it comes to Euro-China relations, but it's definitely not as bad between them and the U.S. I'm not sure if they'd want to join in the U.S. I think the British would, of course, but, that's the Brits. But yeah, to me, it's just very frustrating that why are we wasting resources for this when the conflict is known, we know where it's at, and we can see to its end. Russia has spent a lot of resources, and that's the thing. It's like, that's a 10-year plan they have. A 10-year plan for 5% GDP on defense spending. Guys, just help us knock Russia out, and there you go. Help us knock Russia out, and, from there, we don't need a 10-year plan for this sort of spending, man. It's unnecessary. So it's frustrating. It's frustrating, and obviously, as lay people, we don't have all the information behind the scenes, what is going on. So I always have to give some of my speculation some pinch of salt, like, all right, what do I not know? Obviously there are players in play that know what's actually happening. There's a greater fog of war for me behind what is actually happening on the geopolitical state. But when I see this sort of stuff, I do have to question. It's like, what is the grand strategy here? Why are we building up against Russia when Russia is about to, it's exhausted itself pretty well? Just help us out with a little more of a push, and that's it. There you go. Peace in Europe again. All right, guys, that's Florida Man's rant. Everything else is going good here in Ukraine. I hate to say it's going good, because it's not good here for the war effort, but I'm doing good work. The drone school's going pretty good. I'll make a video a bit later, maybe next week or so, just an update to give you guys see what I've been up to. But yeah, that's it for Florida Man. Florida Man out.